Hi, I'm Sarah Resco, and I am your teacher consultant for the student with hearing loss in your classroom. And I'm going to run through this presentation with you to get you ready for this year. And don't worry if you've never had a kid with student, or you've never had a student with hearing loss in your classroom. You might feel nervous or unsure what to do, but I'm here and I will help you through it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is how hearing loss is measured. So every child with hearing loss will get an audiogram, and I will provide you a specific copy of your students, and we will talk about it. On the left side is the level of noise, and it goes from very quiet at the top, you can see the 0, all the way down to 120, and those are the loudest noises. You can see the gunshot and the airplane visual. At the top, it's the pitch, so it goes from low pitch on the left side, low voices, to very, very high pitch. Some students are able to hear low pitch noises easier than high pitch. Some are the opposite is true. So we will go through and I will also show you the level of hearing loss. So some speech sounds may be very difficult for your student to hear. And that is important with phonics and reading, decoding words. So we'll go through that and I will give you some strategies that will work with your students. So don't worry, but it's important to know how to read this audiogram. Okay, some quick things about students with hearing loss. If you've never met a child or a person with hearing loss, it's important to know that they do mistake certain words that sound the same, ship, sit, words that have different endings but start the same. They may also have a speech and language delay typically because most children are given their hearing aids or cochlear implants around 1 year of age. So they have missed a whole year of that language. So they are sometimes behind their peers, and their speech can be difficult to understand, but don't worry, as long as you get to know your student, you'll be able to get to know them and understand their speech, and don't give up trying to understand what they're saying. Students with hearing loss have a lot of issues with vocabulary. They might know one word for something specific, but they might not know a lot of different ways to describe something. So that's something that we can talk about for ELA subjects. They have a hard time understanding idioms, like hold your horses. They take things very literally. So we can talk about what are some strategies to help you. And they might not understand a lot of jokes and riddles. And the most important thing to understand is they can be the most comfortable when they are in charge of the conversation, because obviously if they're in charge of the conversation, then they know what the topic is and they're going to be comfortable talking about it. So they might have a hard time connecting with peers. They obviously will misinterpret information. The most important thing for you to understand is that they will have difficulty hearing in any noise. Even when your classroom is quiet, there will be papers rustling, students chatting quietly, pencils moving, chairs moving. This can be very difficult for your student to hear or concentrate. So we will talk about some assistive technology that will help that. We talked about discriminating among similar speech sounds or words. And another thing is they will have difficulty locating the speaker in a group situation. So they're not going to have difficulty finding you in the classroom because you are typically the one standing, walking around, but they will have difficulty finding the student that is answering the question. So a good strategy is to say the name of the child you are calling on and point to them and let the student with hearing loss turn and look at that child so they can see their face. Students with hearing loss, they do have language delays, and sometimes that can translate to academic delays. So they can start to realize that they might be less competent than other students in the classroom, and that can affect their self-esteem. Sometimes they can be left out by peers during games or recess time. As they get older, I very much notice the middle school age don't really love using their FM systems, hearing aids. They haven't had much pushback from me, but anything that can make them seem different or stand out, obviously, they are not a fan of. Um, with my support, they can understand their hearing loss and understand strategies to help them, and they can be a little bit more accepting to using their equipment and having help. Also, the parents, if your student is very young, maybe a preschool, kindergartner, first grade, parents can be anxious, and parents just want their child to be able to keep up with their peers. So we might need to have bi-monthly meetings with the parents to talk about how the student is doing. It's important to communicate with the parent, especially how the student is doing in the classroom and if there's any hearing aid, cochlear implant, FM issues. Okay. The most important thing for children with hearing loss is that they are identified with hearing loss at birth and they are given hearing aids or cochlear implants as soon as possible. Students that are early intervention that are given hearing aids and cochlear implants before the age of 1 do seem to catch up with their peers, but students that aren't amplified until 3, 4, 5 have a really hard time catching up. This is because children listen to the language in the home and they learn a lot from listening to mom and dad have conversations or siblings. So if they're missing out on conversations, they're missing out on brain development. Okay, what can you do at school to help these children? I just mentioned their lack of language can translate to lack of academic progress. So they're not able to express themselves, they're not able to have good reading comprehension skills. They have a hard time understanding things from other people's perspectives. The good news for that is read alouds and children's literature research has shown that this is helpful for children with hearing loss to put themselves in other people's shoes. So if they do have a language delay, they were implanted later in life, it's really important that we just saturate them with literacy, and then that way they might be able to make up in academic progress. So when you see a child with hearing aids or cochlear implants, or you see the FM system, it's not just helping them hear, it's actually helping their brain grow. So every time you are speaking with a child, explaining a concept, reading aloud, you are helping their brain develop and making them a better learner. Okay, so there are some things that you can do to assist this language development that is delayed in these children. A lot of times children with hearing loss have limited speech or expression. So an example, they might say, I'm gonna get 2 books. It's library day. So you know they're going to the library. So it's always a good idea to expand their message and add in language. Oh, you're going to the library to get 2 new books. How exciting. How do you feel about that? What type of book might you pick out? Keep expanding those language opportunities for them. As I said before, children, depending on their hearing loss, will have trouble accessing certain sounds of speech. So we will look at the audiogram together and we'll see what sounds the child hears really well and we'll see what sounds the child will struggle with. And those typically translate into their own speech as well. So that will be important for us to know. Very important to know that children with hearing loss require 3 times the exposure to learn new words and concepts. So although it takes them longer, they are able to understand things and get things. So don't lose patience. One day you might realize that something just clicks for them and they are understanding a concept that you taught a couple weeks ago. I will give you a lot of tips depending on the specific child for teaching literacy skills. I can help with direct instruction. We can talk about phonograms and like I said, compared to the audiogram, which ones they're going to struggle with. I can give the child and you tips on blending and segmenting that are more visual for this child. And we can talk about adapting some assessments, some classroom-based assessments if needed, and I can always help with those classroom assessments. Now we're going to talk about some listening strategies. So this is called the Ling 6 sound test, and this is something I will teach you to do if you are not sure that the child is hearing you very well. These sounds incorporate all the speech sounds on that audiogram. So if you say a sound, if you say and the child is not able to point to the ice cream, then you know they're not hearing that sound. If they're not able to point to the sh sign, then you know they're not hearing the sh sound. This can really let you know if a child's hearing aid or cochlear implant is not working. And then this is a time where you would call me. So I will teach you how to do the Ling 6 sound test. It's really simple, really quick. A lot of the kids already know how to do it, so it'll be quick and easy, and it's a great way to know what they're hearing. So here's the Ling 6 sounds, and accompany it with an audiogram. I have this on the right side. I have a laminated card for you of all the Ling 6 sounds, and we'll go through it, and I have a handout on how to do this. So this is really easy. This will take away the, I don't think they're hearing me. Then you'll know for sure what sounds they're hearing and what they're not, and then we can troubleshoot, okay, if they are able to hear everything, is this an attention issue? I can give you some more strategies to use in the classroom. So speaking of strategies, here's a ton of strategies. I have about 3 slides of these. It's important to get the students' attention prior to giving a message. So you might want to say, Jacob, go get your shoes, instead of go get your shoes. That way these children with hearing loss are trained to, once they hear their name or they hear the word listen, then they know it's time to pay attention. Don't exaggerate your speech or yell. They are looking at your mouth, and so normal speech is very important to have. Don't face the chalkboard. You want to make sure that your face is always visible for the student. And when I mentioned earlier about pointing to other children and calling their name, encourage that student to turn and look, not just that student, but you could say, oh, Jonathan's answering a question. Let's all look at him while he's talking. Then that child is not singled out, but your whole class is learning good strategies. It's important, deaf and hard of hearing children really rely on the routines of your classroom, and if they're thrown for a loop, they might not know exactly what to do. So it's nice to have the visual schedule. It's important to know what subject you're teaching. Okay, it's time for math. Let's get out our math books, and the child his brain is ready for math. It's important to provide, if you are doing any, especially in the upper elementary grades, if you're doing any ELA readings, any larger chapter books, specific social studies texts, we can go through and look at the vocabulary that might be challenging for that student or concepts, and I can pre-teach them to that student. So when he's in or she is in the general ed classroom, they are not using their brain power to process what things mean. They're able to pay attention and stay on task. It's important to rephrase rather than repeat. So instead of saying the same exact thing again when the child doesn't understand, just try to say it in a different way. Again, make sure you look at the teacher's face. If a student is speaking quietly when answering a question, repeat what they said. Oh, Johnny had a great idea. He said this, da-da-da-da-da. That way the child is hearing it twice, or they're hearing it from you while you're wearing the microphone. If you ask a deaf child, can you hear me? They're always going to say yes. So instead of saying yes, say, what did you hear me say? What is the first thing that we're going to do today? Or what book did I say to get out? What page are we on? Asking those WH questions are really important to check for understanding. And it's